What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. This video today is all about Viessa. Whether you're playing normal Viessa or ultimate Viessa, this video has you covered because the build that I'm going to show you in this video works on either one of those two variants. The only difference is you would change the Transcendant mod, obviously. I want to start off with a short preface on my thoughts on Viessa and her power level and whether she is a good descendant. And I realize that a lot of this is very, down to each person to decide. I've met some die-hard fans of Viessa that don't want to play anything else and thinks that, she's the best shit ever. And that's cool. I want you to keep on thinking that because you should play what you want to play. But personally, in my opinion, I think Viessa is probably the weakest ultimate descendant that we have in the game right now. And don't get me wrong, I don't mean from like weakest as in power level, as in how much damage she can deal, but basically what your options are. The point being that Viessa is exceptionally good at mobbing, but she's good at a certain kind of mobbing. I read a funny comment under a video somewhere that called her a spawn camper, and that's because a lot of her damage is based on dealing damage to zones. And if enemies move out of those zones or away from the AoE, then you aren't getting those kills, and that can be super frustrating. If you're looking at something like Bunny or Freyna, who are also exceptional mobbing characters, but their damage essentially moves with them or moves out so far, like in the case of Freyna, that positioning isn't really a problem. I think secondly, the other issue is that Viessa seems to be a lot more powerful in terms of a kit, but it's just something about it that doesn't click for me. And again, like I said, it can be the fact that she's so reliant on positioning and everything like that, and that can cause some frustration when you play her. But I also think the fact that most of her Transcendent mods aren't very sexy, aren't very, exciting to try and do things with, is another thing that probably deters me from her. So it's for these reasons, everything that I'm saying here right now, that if somebody comes to me and asks me which ultimate descendant should I be going for and everything like that, generally speaking, I put ultimate Viessa at the bottom of that list because she's kind of like a one-trick pony. You're going to be doing a lot of good mobbing with her in a very specific way, and you'll be able to tackle some bosses with her. But when you stack her up against some of the other ultimate descendants, she's going to feel lackluster because she's going to lack some options, she's going to lack some damage, and she's just overall going to not feel as powerful. I'm sorry, it is what it is. But that being said, when we look at her base stats without slapping any mods or anything into her, she starts with 15% critical hit rate and a 1.2 times multiplier. That is fairly high in terms of like what some descendants start with, and it puts her in a position where building her to do crit damage is a sound decision to make. It's not the only way to build her for sure, but it definitely makes sense in a character like Viessa, in a descendant like Viessa, because especially when you look at ultimate Viessa, which we're also going to show off, we're going to look at the Transcendent mod for that. Absolutely, critting is an important part of you dealing damage and getting as much, sort of juice out of that build as you possibly can. So let's dive into the build. Now, first things first, even though it says Ultimate Viessa at the top here, this first build, or the build that I'm going to show you, this one is suited for even if you're just playing normal Viessa, because we're not going to use her Ultimate Transcendent mod. Speaking about Transcendent mods, it's probably a good idea to quickly just go through some of my choices here and the reason why I settled on the two Transcendent mods, which I'll be highlighting in this build video. Now, first things first, basically I keep saying first things first, so this would be like third things first, right? The star, I believe, of her kit is Blizzard. I know that Frost Shards is really good, and I mean, there's a good cause to argue that Cold Snap is fantastic, but the star of her build really is Blizzard, because you can empower this to create this massive kill box, which basically deals damage every 2 seconds, and then eventually pushes out a massive AoE explosion. And this can lock down into entire areas, and it's one of the reasons why she gets called a spawn camper, because if you know where the enemy is going to spawn, you can put this down on top of that area, and trust me, nothing's going to come out walking there. Now, for that reason, it makes sense to choose Transcendent mods that at the very least affect that ability or empower you to do that ability more often or better. It's for that reason that some of her Transcendent mods just aren't very good. Hypothermia seems really good on paper, but in terms of like stacking her up against something like Absolute Zero or Cold-Bloodedness, those two are just superior to it. Glacial Cloud is kind of silly because basically all this does is it just allows you to, instead of putting down your blizzard, you just kind of like throw it forward like so it just allows you to get it out further. That's it. It doesn't deal more damage. It doesn't have better stats, nothing like that. So this is like a really, really weird Transcendent mod for me because it's by far probably like the weakest in its pants. It might not be the weakest, but my God, it's like gotta be like top 3 or something like that. Then we have Cold-Bloodedness, which is the one that we're going to use now starting out. I just want to finish on talking about Cold Snap Watch and Cold Cohesion. Cold Snap Watch basically augments your third ability, and essentially this ice road that you throw, or this ice patch that you throw out, then has a chance to pretty much like cast ice shackle and things like that, and essentially lock the enemies down. That's it. That's all it does. It doesn't improve the damage of it. It doesn't do anything else. So again, what the fuck? And then last but not least, Cold Cohesion. She has her passive ability means that whenever she deals damage to enemies, it stores a cold charge, an ice sphere, and these will fly out from her. The best thing, I don't know if it's actually going to show it here. It doesn't seem to show it, but you guys will see it in some of the footage that's playing in the background. But basically, she stores up these. You can have a certain amount of these orbiting around you, by default 3. What Cold Cohesion does is it lets you store up 5. And it slightly lowers the cooldown. So by default, the cooldown for these is 20 seconds. What Cold Cohesion does is it makes it 15 seconds. So again, just from the perspective of like Transcendent mods massively boosting the power level of a character or drastically changing the way that they play, neither one of those two things are done by most of her Transcendent mods. Now, I say most of her Transcendent mods because Cold-Bloodedness is really good. Basically what this does is it changes her second ability to not drop this kind of like ice road behind you anymore, everything like that, but to rather become like a buff that you essentially activate, okay? And then what this does is it makes that the next ability that you cast, that ability deals more damage and has a faster cooldown. So for example, what you would do is you would fuck around, everything like that, and right before you're about to drop your blizzard, you throw up Cold-Bloodedness, and then while that is active, you throw out a blizzard. That means then your blizzard the next blizzard will have a much shorter cooldown, and we're going to drop that cooldown right down into the ground, and basically it's going to deal more damage. So it's essentially like a buff that you prime up and then you go. The cool thing about this is it works for all of her spells, so it's a good idea if you build it well enough that you kind of like almost have this active the entire time, and then you can just keep on slinging out because it lowers the mana cost of things as well. So you basically can just go ham on your spells, on your skills, and that's pretty much what we're going to go for. So building around Cold-Bloodedness, we're going to do two things. We're going to go for as fast as possible cooldowns, and we're going to go for a lot of critical damage. So first things first, let's just give ourselves a little bit of survivability. I think I should call this video First Things First. So we're going to just give ourselves some HP here. So 1 second, let me find that guy. Boom. So just give ourselves a little bit of survivability. Usually when I build characters that are only used for mobbing, then I go full glass cannon, but I get a lot of shit for that. So I'm going to throw in a little bit of HP here just to, assuage the savages. Okay, then we're gonna go for crit, right? So our mods, our 2 blue mods for crit are skill insight and skill concentration. So let's go find those quickly. Where are we looking for? We should go all the way to the bottom, right? Yes, sir. Okay, so skill insight is going to give us a bunch of skill critical hit rate, and then skill concentration is going to give us a bunch of skill critical hit damage. This is really good. This is already pushing us up to very, very nice levels. Now we're going to continue on with this by also slapping in something called emergency measures. Emergency measures is more critical hit rate and more critical hit damage. Bam. So now we're already looking really good on this. Now, the next thing that we should be doing is we should be focusing on dropping cooldowns, because even though Cold-Bloodedness drops the cooldowns of the skills, we have a really, really long cooldown on Blizzard, and we want to be dropping that as far down as we can so that we can get close to like a 7 to 8 to 9 second Blizzard, which is totally possible, especially when you fold Cold-Bloodedness into your, rotation. So to do that, the simplest way to get more cooldown reduction is to slap in Nimble Fingers. And then there's another mod which also does it very well, which is MP Conversion, right? This one gives us even more skill cooldown. It does reduce our max MP a little bit, but that's not the end of the world. Okay, and we're going to do that. And then now we have a pretty good base here. Maybe we can do one more. We can do something like Focus on Chill. Focus on Chill gives us a little bit of additional skill cooldown still as well. Plus it gives us some chill skill power, which is very, very nice. Now we have very, very good cooldown reduction on here. Our frost shards is down to 2.2 seconds, which is essentially almost like instant because it takes almost 2 seconds for the portrait to refresh after you cast something. Our third ability, Cold Snap, is down to 6.4 seconds, which is very nice. And our Blizzard is down to 19.1 seconds. But the thing here is, what you'll notice, and I'll play some footage in the background right now, is if you fold Cold-Bloodedness into your skill rotation, then it actually drops almost down to almost about 8 seconds, and that means that you can essentially have a Blizzard out as soon as the other one is finished, you know, running, because it has a 6-second duration. So this is really, really sexy, and this is how we just keep on pushing out these Blizzards and go nuts with them. Now, for the remainder of our module slots here, we need to also be increasing our range. This is very important because by default the radius of Blizzard is not that big, and it makes this really, really cool spell hit a very, very small area, and if the enemies move out of that area or you can't choke an area with this, then you're losing a lot of damage. So one of the easiest ways to do that is a blue mod by the name Skill Expansion. If I could spell, that would be fantastic. That's going to give us a whole bunch of additional range, 92.3 to be exact. And then we go ahead and we put in amp control as well. So amplification control. Ampli, there we go. And that's going to give us even more range, and it's going to give us a little bit of shield. So hey, you survivability nuts out there, I got you covered. We put in a little bit of HP and a little bit of shield. We're good to go. That leaves one last mod slot, and this is what I would call a flex slot. All right, now by default, and it's usually a good idea, it's usually a good idea to run an ultimate mod in here, because they can be in certain cases almost like, you know, completely changing the, you know, a specific thing that your character could be struggling with, like for example maintenance of your MP. So let's say at the very beginning when you're learning to play this, and it was this way for me, the muscle memory will fail you sometimes, and you will have a situation where you'll forget to activate Cold-Bloodedness or something like that, or you'll just go too fucking hard on the skills and you won't be watching your MP and you'll run out. This is especially true if you're not level 40 yet and if you don't have nice external components. In this case, something like not Dangerous Ambush, what am I saying? Something like MP Collector can be a lifesaver. Now, in the case of you using this for mobbing and 400% dungeons and stuff like that, you are going to be seeing a lot of blue bricks dropping, right? Which you get MP from. But this just makes it even better, because it means that when you kill enemies, there's a chance that that also refreshes your mana pool, which is just great, which means you pretty much never run out. Now, in the case of you wanting to take this build out and kill, let's say, a couple of the first Void Intercept bosses, or at the very least be able to deal some decent damage if you go in groups and you want to use Viessa, you want to be swapping MP Collector out for the one which I accidentally threw up just now, which is Dangerous Ambush. Now, Dangerous Ambush is really, really good for any character that channels damage. Because the point is, when you throw this onto a Void Intercept boss that is currently like immobilized, like let's say you shot some of his armor off or something like that and they collapse down to the ground, this means that this ramps up your damage on that enemy because it is considered immobilized considerably. It makes it deal a lot more damage. Furthermore, if you are bossing with Viessa, you can have situations where you are, of course, playing with other characters, other descendants, and they might have the aggro of the boss at the time, which means you capitalize once again on all the additional damage that comes from Dangerous Ambush. So those would be the two that I advise you to sort of like switch between. There are some other options which maybe deserve to be mentioned or something like that, but honestly, the two strongest ones happens to be Dangerous Ambush and MP Collector, and both of them are Xantic mods, so it means that you don't waste a mod slot and you're good to go. So this right here, this is what I would advise you to use if you don't plan on going for Ultimate Viessa and you just want to build a Viessa and you want that Viessa to be really, really good at mobbing in a spawn campy kind of situation, then I think this is going to treat you well. Now, in terms of your Reactor and in terms of your external components, for this particular setup, my recommendation, of course, is a Frozen Mechanics Reactor, because it is chill and tech. And the reason why it's chill and tech matters is because Blizzard And I keep moving my face around, but Blizzard is a chill and tech skill. Yes, Frost Shards is fusion. Yes, Cold Snap is fusion, but the majority of your sick-ass AoE damage is going to be coming from Blizzard. Yes, dude, don't get me wrong, Frost Shards puts in the work for sure, but the majority of your damage is going to be coming from Blizzard, so you want to be benefiting from as much Blizzard damage as possible. So, frozen mechanics, it is. Now, in my particular case, I chose to focus on putting critical hit damage and critical hit rate, having those two as my substats. Okay? Now, of course, if you plan on using this character to go up against Void Intercept bosses, sure, Colossus damage can be good as well, and in that case I would maybe consider replacing critical hit rate with Colossus damage and still keeping critical hit damage in. If you're only going to be mobbing with this, then things like cooldown and range and stuff like that is also sexy, but since we have the mods configured the way that we do, I really like crit hit and crit damage because I end up with 46% critical hit rate and 3.2 times multiplier on this character, and that's pretty decent. That means 1 in every 2 almost hits, basically crits, and this is very, very good for us in terms of like our damage profile. Now, for our external components, Viessa is absolutely a case where Slayer is fantastic. Slayer does a bunch of things. It increases your your general rounds capacity. It gives you more rounds per magazine. It also does increase your skill cost, but it gives you 26.1% additional skill power as a and that is really just really good. There's no reason that you would not want that, especially because it's just a situation where you can have some really good defensive stats on your Slayer modules. Slayer modules roll like defense, max shield, and max HP, which is not the best configuration, but you can have some good substats on there, like more HP, some of your resistances, and then of course on your sensor you can have some MP and MP recovering combat, which is GOAT as well, and then basically the rest of the things essentially filling out all of your resistances. So in my opinion, this is a very, very good setup for a base Viessa. And let's go ahead and look at Ultimate Viessa. And here we have the Ultimate Viessa build, which looks drastically different to the one that we just built for normal Viessa. No, wait, it doesn't. The only difference we have here is now, instead of using Cold-Bloodedness, we're using a Ultimate Viessa exclusive Transcendent mod called Absolute Zero. And the reason why we're doing this is because Absolute Zero is basically the better version of Cold-Bloodedness without the mana gain. If that makes any sense. So you can see that in the case of it, I'll quickly just flip through it here. In the case of Cold-Bloodedness only really augments your second skill and basically creates this mana battery from it, right? Or like something that buffs you and then basically gives you better cooldown. Now in the case of Absolute Zero, it actually augments all of your skills, but all of your skills have a better skill power modifier. Let me show you again. I'm flipping between them. So let's look at Blizzard here. Blizzard has times 1435.2. When we put in Cold-Bloodedness, it has times 1435.2. When we put in Absolute Zero, it has times 1516. Not a massive difference, but a difference nonetheless, and it deals more damage. Now this is true for each one of the skills. Their multipliers are better than the base versions of. So Absolute Zero augments all of her abilities, makes them all deal more damage, and then instead of, and I'll quickly just flip it off again, maybe I'll move my face over here, instead of your abilities doing this secondary ice shackle effect, basically what Absolute Zero does is on crits, you pretty much just create an ice sphere, and then on critical hits, you also cause frostbite to enemies. Now frostbite is a unique debuff to ice damage, and it's the effect that you see when enemies become frozen. So whenever you crit, you freeze enemies for a 2-second duration. That's really, really powerful, and it helps you to deal more damage with skills like Blizzard, which depend on the enemies being inside an area for you to be able to deal more damage to them. So other than that, the build is exactly the same. We keep all the same mods in and everything like that. And again, the same things that I said to you just now, but now even more important is if you decide to use this build to mob and to do 400% infiltrations, dungeons, then you should absolutely consider swapping Dangerous Ambush out for something like MP Collector. MP Collector is going to do you good, and it's going to make sure that you have enough mana to be able to cast all of these skills pretty much on cooldown as soon as you want. You're going to have the same really low cooldowns almost as you had with the Cold-Bloodedness. The only difference being that you're going to feel it a little bit with Blizzard, because you're not going to get that snappy under 10-second Blizzard cooldown anymore. It's going to be closer to the 20 seconds that we have here as advertised. But the bottom line is you're still going to be able to cast most of these pretty much off cooldown, and you're going to be hitting like a Mac truck. In the case of you deciding to field this out against Voided Descent boss, obviously remember to swap MP Collector for our bad boy over here, Dangerous Ambush, and you're pretty much good to go. Now, just to finish us out here quickly, I just want to talk about the Reactor and the external components for Ultimate Viessa, because that is actually different. Now, the first thing that you have to notice is that instead of using frozen mechanics, I'm using frozen singularity. And you might be wondering, what the fuck? That is because when you equip this Transcendant module, Absolute Zero, what it actually does, and this is another reason why this is a really, really good Transcendant module, is it actually makes all of her damage types chill and singular, chill and singular, chill and singular, chill and singular. So everything becomes chill and singular, which means that you should also change your reactor choice, and you should be going away from frozen mechanics, and you should be using frozen singularity, because that is chill and singular. Now, in this case, once again, the same reasons why I chose critical hit damage and critical hit rate still ring true here. And that's because if we go and we look, we'll see that our critical hit rate is 46.7%, and our critical hit damage on skills is times 3.3. So it means when we crit, not only do we get that nice frozen effect of freezing enemies in place, but we're also critting for a lot, and we're critting quite often. For external components, I think Polar Knight works really well here, because again, the point is that this gives us a little bit of additional chill skill power, which is great, but it also gives us this Forset ability, which says for each frostbite stack inflicted upon enemies, firearm critical hit damage, skill critical hit damage goes up. And when defeating an enemy inflicted with frostbite, they actually pretty much explode and do an AoE damage. So this adds a nice ancillary AoE effect to your damage, and basically means that your blizzards can even like ring out a little bit and deal a little bit more damage. Or when you shoot stuff with frost shards, it also deals a bit more damage. Now, last but not least, obviously, we will focus on survivability stats and stuff like that. On the sensor, we want max MP and max MP recovery. In combat, really, really good shit. Let's talk weapons to finish us off here. This is a long enough video as it is. But for me, recently I fell in love with the Final Masterpiece, and the Final Masterpiece is hilarious with Viessa running exactly this build. I think it's really, really awesome. It also suits the whole run and gun and being able to move around fast and reposition your blizzards and just, you know, act like a hooligan. It works really well there. If you're looking for a powerhouse, gun that just does a lot of work for the times when your skills are not ready to be cast yet, or you basically just want to punch a hole through something, you can't go wrong with Enduring Legacy. It is a phenomenal weapon. I have a build for Enduring Legacy on my channel. I have a build for Final Masterpiece on my channel. Other standouts, of course, Greg's Reverse Fate will always not be a shit choice. And I guess we could also probably throw Thunder Cage into the ring here because of the AoEs that Thunder Age causes. You can Thunder Cage. Did I say Thunder Age? That Thunder Cage causes is also good and can help you out in situations where you're locking down the whole battlefield with some Blizzard. I think that's pretty much it in terms of, I know that Clairvoyance is a weapon that is somehow, I would say, almost in a way perfectly suited for Viessa, but I personally fucking hate this gun and I refuse to use it. So you'll also notice that I don't have a build video for that yet on my channel, but I just do not like beam rifles in this game, and Clairvoyance is a beam rifle, so it goes right in the dumpster according to me. However, I think you can do well with any of these other choices. Even Perforator now, the way that it's, now after the changes, is really, really good, so you can go well with that. But pretty much you want to complement her kit with a weapon that does AoE as well, and therefore you're just basically blasting and just, killing everything in massive amounts, which is kind of like what she's all about. And that's gonna be it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. As always, fucking cheers.